Hi, I'm Dan from Later Glares, and today we're doing a very special episode. We're talking about one of my favorite authors, H.G. Wells. Now, H.G. Wells is pretty much known for his science fiction work, but I'm going to talk about some of his other works first, and then I'm going to get into the author about himself, just so that you know what you're in for in this video. So it might be a bit lengthy here. So the first thing I want to talk to is about his short story collection. This is 30 Strange Stories. This takes about H.G. Wells' short story work. And the interesting thing about this is that while H.G. Wells is known for science fiction, not all these stories are actually science fiction. A lot of them are psychological or supernatural horror and stuff like that. For example, one of the ones called The Strange Orchard is actually about vampires. Another one is called The Cone. That was more of a psychological horror about somebody dealing with their guilt. There's another that deals with bullying. Alright, the undead. It's all a bunch of different stuff that, he's done before. So it's all usually horror and other types of fiction that not many people would think that H.G. Wells had written. It's very difficult to go through every single story in here. As I mentioned, there are 30 short stories. So if I was to go through every single work and make this video for far too long. So I'm just going to explain a few of his main works, the ones I think are really good. Strange Orchard. I'll say a very good one. I suggest reading that. The Strange Orchard I also found in another collection too. So I read it before I actually read this collection. The Cone is a really good one. That one's deals with psychological horror and dealing with guilt and stuff like that, and seeing the guilt manifest in kind of like a strange horror-like vision. I also think Pollock and the Porchman. That one's also really good too. And Under the Knife. That one I kind of like because it's kind of like why I deal with like my favorite type of horror, Under the Knife. It's a little gory though, but it's gory for like 1800s. When H.G. Wells wrote this book. So yeah, this 30 of his Strange Stories. It's a short work by him, and it's a little something different. Like there are still science fiction stories in this collection, but most of it is psychological or supernatural horror, which is something that H.G. Wells isn't really well known for. The other thing I have here is what he is known for. This contains 6 of his most popular novels. These are the science fiction novels that H.G. Wells has become known for. The most popular out of all of these is, of course, The Time Machine, The Invisible Man, and War of the Worlds. It also contains The Island of Dr. Moreau, The First Men in the Moon, and The Food of the Gods. These are the science fiction novels that everyone knows H.G. Wells for. They gave him his reputation. To give a brief summary of some of these. Now, I will admit, I have not read 2 of these. Unfortunately, I didn't have time. The First Men in the Moon and The Food of the Gods I hadn't really gotten into. I thought they were okay. I didn't really get to read too much of them, but I will get to that soon. The ones I really want to talk about are The Time Machine and The Invisible Man. Those ones are 2 of my favorites out of this. And I'll get to War of the Worlds in a second, but everyone knows that one. The Time Machine basically deals with a man who, after dealing with a traumatic incident of the death of someone he loved, he tries to go back in time and invents a time machine to try and go back in time and prevent her death. However, each time he does this, the same thing happens over and over again. He comes to the realization that he can't change the past. So he tries to go to the future to hopefully find a way to change the past. I know, it doesn't really make much sense. He ends up getting knocked out at one point while traveling to different times. Ends up waking in the year 40,000. And the thing is, basically, the moon is destroyed. There's an underground section of people who are like cannibalistic. And the thing is, he's living with a group of people on top. Alright. Time Machine has been basically parried or used many times before, and everyone has always seen the thing with like you pull the lever and it goes to like a different time. It's got a big giant wheel in the back of him, So that's like basically what a time machine is. Invisible Man. My first introduction was actually the old 1933 movie, or 34. It's like the old black and white film. This deals with a man named Griffin, a doctor who after doing an experiment, was able to turn himself invisible. However, the invisibility causes him to go insane, and he becomes somewhat murderous, and diabolical in his way, believing he's above everyone else and wants to use that power over everyone. Which, it starts off normal enough where, like, as an invisible person, you would try and play pranks on people, but the pranks become less harmless and more evil. So, that one's also really good. The Island of Dr. Monroe, that's, Dr. Monroe, he lives on an island. He's creating a bunch of different monstrosities and stuff like that. It's kind of a straightforward story about that. That one's a little bit hard to go into because there's so much that goes on that I don't really want to spoil it. I would suggest reading that one for yourself. And, of course, his most famous work, The War of the Worlds. Everybody, even if they've never read it, knows what War of the Worlds is. It's one of the first, and if not, maybe the first, alien invasion story. Alright? Where aliens come down. Thing is, they attack England at the time. Most movies have basically changed it to more modern day, and it's set in America, but the original one was based in England. And it has like a whole philosophy about it that doesn't matter how powerful you are of a superpower, there's always something more powerful than you. And there's a whole thing about like the small defeating the large and stuff like that, which also explains like when the aliens are defeated in the end, that there's something small can defeat something so large. It also has also the aliens that have been depicted in the novel are not really the aliens that have been shown throughout movies and stuff like that. They're actually very different. In the novel, they're described to be gray with like tentacle-like bodies. All depictions after that have never really had them where they're like tentacle-like bodies. And the machines they walk around on are tripod, but it's not really described what they exactly look like, so that's usually just a design choice in most movies, but it is mentioned the things that they are tripod in a way. So what I really want to talk about of H.G. Wells is the man himself. So H.G. Wells has been called the father of science fiction with his work. It has become popular. It has inspired so many other works after him. Many books, comics, TV shows, movies have been inspired by H.G. Wells' work in the science fiction. So H.G. Wells was born in 1866 and died in 1946, sometime after World War II had ended. He had written one of these books back in the time, in the 1800s when England was a big superpower. He actually ended up making some weird scientific predictions of things that hadn't really existed yet during his time. He had predicted things such as aircrafts, tanks, space travel, nuclear weapons, poison gas, and something that resembles the internet. So he predicted all these things in his work, and these things all exist today. Alright, because tanks the first time weren't really used until World War I, after H.G. Wells had already written War of the Worlds, and he mentioned something like tanks. Another book that he has that really mentions tanks is The Land of Ironclads, which is, they're basically motorized vehicles with weapons on them, which sounds a lot like a tank. Nuclear weapons were mentioned. He mentions in War of the Worlds a bomb that's used to decimate a whole city. For those who know, nuclear bombs have the ability to decimate a whole city. Poison gas, there's mention of a poison spray used that poisoned and killed people. There's also mention of flying vehicles, and many other things that wouldn't have existed during his time. And the thing about the internet, I forget what story it was from, but it was kind of something like the internet. You can log in and find a bunch of information everywhere that has ever existed, which is kind of what the internet is a little bit. You can find information everywhere just by typing it in. Although, we do know some things on the internet are not completely true, though, but, you take what you can get. To me, H.G. Wells, how I first found out about him is I did a report of War of the Worlds back in high school. Since then, I've been obsessed with science fiction and his work. To find out that he wrote more than just science fiction is interesting to me. He also wrote some nonfiction, too, so if you're interested in that, look some of that up. He's done things like politics, some philosophy and stuff like that. They're considered nonfiction works and things. You can definitely read that of his if you are interested in his nonfiction work. But I feel like his fiction work is really where it shines, especially in science fiction. I think H.G. Wells was probably my favorite author of all time. And the thing is, his work is just really got me into my love of reading in the first place. So, yeah. If you're a fan of H.G. Wells, definitely read him. And the thing is, as I mentioned, some of my recommendations are Orchard, Cone, Pollock and the Porchman, and of course Under the Knife. And if you want to read his collection work, which is this one right here, I suggest reading all of these, but my favorite are, of course, The Time Machine, The Invisible Man, and War of the Worlds. I know, I'm basic with that stuff. But yeah, I just thought I'd give a brief thing about like my favorite author and give him a kind of a spotlight of like what his work is to me and who he was as a person and why his work is such a big thing to me and such an inspiration. So yeah, if you like H.G. Wells, definitely think about leaving a like on this video, you know? And, you know, don't be afraid to read his work in the future. There's a bunch of other stuff out there than just the science fiction, and I definitely recommend reading it. Yeah. Till next time, keep reading.